Well, welcome to Black History Conversations. Another Friday. Gosh, the time goes by. I'm Liz Millman from Learning Links International, and I've got a couple of my colleagues here from Learning Links International. Garrick Prayog, who's also a lead in Justice for Windrush Generations, and Simon Ferrigno, who's uh, does various different consultancy roles, but he's one of our directors too. And Simon's going to make the presentation today, so we're really looking forward to that. We're also welcoming Vivian, David, and Joan, so that's lovely for now. Okay, then. So today's session is really quite special because it's about um, Jacob Wainwright. Have I got that right? Is it Joseph Wainwright?
No, it's Jacob.
Simon.
No, Jacob is correct. Yeah.
Jacob Wainwright is right. Oh, that's good. That's fine. Okay then. So it's good that we've got this opportunity. Simon has been absolutely brilliant with Black History Conversations because he does all the recording and posting. So we're really looking forward to hearing about your presentation in a moment. But just to say, yeah, we're in season 12, getting along with Black History Conversations. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I live at present, which is in Australia, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Also, Black History Conversations acknowledge the injustices of the actions taken by the British and other European countries that invaded and took possession of the islands in the Caribbean Sea, as well as the continents of North and South America. In addition, we also recognise the exploitation of the great continents of Africa, Asia, Australia, and the many other parts of the world in the centuries of colonialisation and ongoing exploitation. We acknowledge that this has resulted in the destruction and destabilisation of so many nations, peoples, and cultures. And we're also following through the International Decade for People of African Descent. This is the last year of that decade. So we're going to be finding out more about that as we go on through the sessions. So, Simon, I'm going to pass over to you now then, because this is just brilliant to have this opportunity, and we're really interested to hear about the fresh look that you've taken at Jacob Wainwright's diary and his visit to the UK in 1874. So really, really interesting session. We're just trying to stop sharing. Okay, so over to you then, Simon.
Thank you, Liz. And I'm going to start sharing. So, can everybody see my screen okay? Good.
Yes, that's beautiful, thank you.
Right, so Jacob Wainwright, who is pictured there on the left, and I'll explain more about that picture in a little bit, but we decided at Belong to start looking at him with our volunteers and community researchers after we did our previous project on the African companions of David Livingstone, because poor Jacob received quite a lot of negative press not that long ago in The Guardian, where he was accused of having internalized white racism. And he received some negative press after his departure from
Vivian,
the UK.
Excuse me, Simon. Vivian, can you hear okay?
Not hearing at all.
Oh, right, okay. Let's...
Volume is a little low, little low, yeah.
Okay, let me try and turn up the volume.
Yeah, please.
The volume button is not cooperating, so I'm gonna... Can you hear me better? I'm trying to...
I think we can hear better now, but turn it up as far as you can.
Yep, I have done. Okay, hope that's better.
Is that better, Vivian? Can you hear
Perfect,
Simon?
perfect.
Lovely. Okay, then. Right. Well, let's hear some more then about why at Belong Nottingham you're doing this particular project, and we've got the picture of Jacob on the left, and we've also got a written document about a speech in London on the right. Okay, over to you, Simon.
Yep. I'll come back to those. So we started looking at Jacob after our previous project on the African companions of David Livingstone. because of the negative coverage about Jacob Wainwright in The Guardian this century, and also in a book early in the 20th century after his death, when he no longer had a right to reply. And we worked with community volunteers, most of whom are from the diaspora, mostly from Africa. Some were African students who'd come to Nottingham to do master's degrees. And we discussed not just Wainwright's story, but also we actually stood in the British Museum last summer discussing what should be repatriated to Nigeria and why. So quite a wide-ranging set of discussions. The agreement was actually that most things should go back to where they came from, and a few things should be lent from the people of Nigeria or Jamaica, so that British people could learn their history a little bit better as well. But Jacob
When you go on, excuse me again, Simon, it's still quite difficult to hear you, so can you go fairly slowly and as loudly as you can?
Okay, I'm trying my best. So to come on to the story, so the picture of Jacob Wainwright there on the left was taken by a photographer, well, an agency called Elliott and Fry in London in 1874, around the time of Livingstone's funeral. It was discovered in Derbyshire archives, just up the road from me, and we were put onto it by one of the people involved in the One More Voice project in the United States, which is documenting the stories of Africans who worked on the Victorian expeditions. And of course, Jacob Wainwright was one of those. And so here he is in London, 1874, having accompanied Livingstone's body from Zanzibar and having been part of the expedition that brought Livingstone's body to Zanzibar. And he's here dressed more or less as a fisherman, and we think that's because, as far as we know, his family were fisherfolk of the Yao people, so in the area that's modern day Malawi, Mozambique border areas. So there's various pictures of Jacob in suits, in traditional African clothing, and in this costume. So we think this is reflecting his background from a fishing family. And as we also know he was enslaved from that area and then rescued in the Indian Ocean, taken to India, where he was educated at a missionary school, and then went initially with the Henry Morgan Stanley expedition to find Livingstone, stayed with Livingstone. But what we wanted to look at was this portrayal of him as having internalized white colonialism true? Was it fair to call him a little bit over, having too high an opinion of himself, as was said in the Alice Fraser book about his visit to Nottingham, or is there something else? And the trigger for that portrayal in The Guardian was a page of his diary in English that came from the David Livingstone Trust in Blantyre. But what we realized when we were doing the African Companions project, that his full diary covering the 9 months of his journey with Livingstone survived through a German translation, which then came to me in French speaker. I read it, and we think it shows a much more complex and rounded character than what was portrayed in that article, and then what was portrayed by Alice Fraser. So we took a dive with our volunteers into that diary, into the journey, and then we also found in the archives, where we found the photo, a transcript of a speech that Wainwright gave at the Missionary Society at the Mechanics Institute in Nottingham, where Charles Dickens had also spoken, and he had a lot of favourable coverage. So that's where we started. So in 1874, he gave this lecture, yeah, it's like I say, more complicated story. I should also add, because Liz also asked about that earlier, as far as we know, his original African name because he was given a different name in India, was Yamutsa. That's all we know about it. We know he was born between 1849 and 59. And so, of course, in this picture, he may have been as young as 14 or 15 and no older than 24. So he was still very young on this visit to the UK. And before coming to Nottingham, where he encountered this very negative sort of reception, well, he had lunch with Queen Victoria. She actually leaves a note in her own diary saying, I saw a copy of the diary of Jacob Wainwright. It was most interesting, most curious is the word she uses, which is a way of saying, in those days, most interesting. He had lunch with the Bishop of Norwich, lords and ladies, prominent bankers. Basically, he was taken up by the anti-slavery. He received very favourable coverage in Britain. He was interviewed by Henry Morton Stanley for the New York Herald. He was a pallbearer for David Livingstone's body in Westminster Abbey. And so when he came to Nottingham, and people sort of were shocked that he expected to have lunch with them, and he suddenly came across a completely different attitude, which we think, from our reading of the diary, is about both class and race. So Alice Fraser, in her book, very clearly says that it's not just his colour, but she describes him as being like a servant when he reigneth, quoting the Bible, claiming he has grown far above himself. So it seems
Simon, are you changing the slides?
I will in a minute. Don't worry, Liz.
Oh, okay, that's
okay.
fine.
Yeah. Yes, so she expresses shock in her book that he expected to have lunch with them, saying that Dr. Livingstone would never have allowed that. But from Wainwright's point of view, why should he not eat with them, given that he just had lunch with all of these well-known people? And then when we look at his diary, because the one page that survived in English, he does say something negative about one of the people that they meet on the journey. But it's one page. So when you read the full diary, he's actually describing a land in conflict, but he's also saying many positive things about people. What he says about the land is, he talks about wilderness areas haunted by robbers, because of course there are still slave raids going on at the time, and there's also emerging colonial takeover, particularly the Portuguese are already there. But he describes a people called the Wakanonga as courageous, industrious, and strong, and their music is the sweetest among all of Africa's nations. So it's not a negative portrayal. But of course, that English diary has disappeared, and I will come back to that towards the end. He describes the land of another people called the Amyawezi, well cultivated, and the town of Mtondo, with people who busily till their fields. But he also talks about another people who've taken refuge on islands to escape from raiders. So this is a land that is being disrupted by slave raids, colonialism, and other conflicts. And his diary is described in the press at the time as being in press, in print. It's about to come out. But Alice Fraser says in her book, financial affairs of the whole Livingstone family were at a low ebb. They're dependent on Livingstone's diary to make some money. And conveniently, Wainwright's diary goes missing before it's published. Although there is another theory that we have come up with as part of the project, which is, what if Queen Victoria never returned it? And maybe it's just gathering dust somewhere in the Royal Archives, and we are going to ask them if they might have a look for it. So Wainwright goes back to Africa, and at that point he sort of disappears really from the narrative about Livingstone, except for these negative portrayals. We know he died in 1882 in Urambo in Tanzania, where there's still a memorial to him, so he wasn't forgotten. So I'm now going to just point to a few other things. So this photo that we found is part of his calling cards that was made when he arrived in England, and that he was able to hand out to people. That is his signature in his own hands. So some of the criticism on these slides is what Alice Fraser said about him. So, you know, where she says to call him as many newspapers did when educated was a great exaggeration. Him as a servant when he reigneth. But here's some of the press coverage. So we have different newspapers all around the country talking about Jacob Wainwright, his tour, his speeches, his book. So here is the one on the left where it says, this is his diary, which is going to be published. And these are the chapters. And what we do know is that it was published in Germany, but never in Britain from this. Then moving on, so he did have his fans. So the Reverend Price was one. Describes him as well-educated, reliable, earnest. Arthur Lang, somebody else, described him as very good. He was one of those who received a medal from the Royal Geographical Society for his contribution to the expeditions. This is the transcript of Queen Victoria's diary where she mentions him. This is, excuse me, the extract from Fraser's book where she talks about the Livingston family needing money. We use that, we're using this as a bit of a detective story when we're doing workshops with schools. To ask where they think the diary might be to get them to reflect on some of the events. Here's an extract from his diary where he talks about the hostile reception they received in one place, but also how they used diplomacy to gain some peace conditions. Here's one of the descriptions of a place in the land in conflict, so Lake Bemba. And he talks about it being surrounded by green hills, and it's fordable only in summer. Numerous islands on it, and inhabitants who have many boats, which they use to carry on trade or communicate. But it talks about people who leave the mainland for fear of enemy attacks. And then we have Wainwright's speech, where he describes his enslavement, how he was freed, and he talks about so how he ended up on the expedition. He talks a little bit about the expedition to bring Livingstone's body back. Again, that was very well received and reported around the country and in the Nottingham papers. This will be going up on the website, so I won't read the whole thing. Obviously, it's quite difficult hearing about how it happened when he was 7 years old, by his own estimates. He talks about the market in Illinois, how it works, how he was taken to Dr. Price's school in Mumbai, what is now Mumbai, Bombay. So he reckons he spent nearly 20 years in that school. Again, that I'm not sure that's correct because it doesn't necessarily inform you at the time. Just a little bit about what we know, and I'm going to end there and see if anybody has any questions.
Gosh, well, that was a whistle-stop tour. Let me just get the video back on again. Right, we can all put our videos back on again now. I was getting close to my laptop so I could hear you okay. Right, brilliant, Simon. Right, we've got a couple of questions in the chat so we can clarify the story. Joan asks, is the full diary available now, whether in German or another language?
I've got the French version. I will dig out the link. You know, I have got a PDF of the English one.
Right.
But it's quite a big document. But I will try and I'll get the web link.
I don't necessarily want to read it. I mean, I'm interested. I mean, as you can imagine, like you know, your whole project, we're just keen to see that the whole thing is available, whether in English, French, German, you know, whatever, that it can be read in its original source. You know, it's an original.
Yes,
in its original.
it can be. It can be. Yeah. It was initially published, the French version, in a journal in the 1970s, an Italian journal. And then a British professor called Roy Bridges did do a translation from the German, which he also annotated. And that is available. That was actually printed, but it never got much circulation because he died. It's something called Four Great Travel Journeys. Yeah.
Okay, and then your second point, Joan, was he was from what is now Kenya.
No, he was what's now Malawi and Madagascar and Mozambique.
All right.
But it's the border area of Malawi, Mozambique.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, if that's okay, Joan. Garrick.
Thanks very much for that, Simon. I'm wondering how widely is this information out there in the public domain? So think about the UK. You're in Nottingham, and I'm thinking, is there any information in any of the museums?
Not yet. We have had our African companions display exhibited at Newstead Abbey, where Livingstone stayed and where Jacob Wainwright visited. We're hoping this will go in there as well. It will be going on the website for the Livingstone at 150 anniversary websites. And possibly the exhibits may be displayed up there as well. We will integrate the findings into a future Black History tour of Nottingham because we have those locations. And then it would be on the Belong website.
Right. So is that how you, my question was going to be, how do you plan to present it in the future? So what you're going to do is
so web display exhibits, mobile exhibits, which can be reused again and again. There will be a short video, and then in future, Belong is planning Black History tours. Right.
Well, that'll be fascinating.
Yeah.
And when will you be wrapping this up? In time for Black History Month next autumn?
Well, it should be, and we're also planning some workshops with schools. I mean, we have had workshops with young people already. But yeah, this story does need to be out there because it's, you know, he has been, in our opinion, misrepresented. What would be really lovely is if somebody picked this up for a piece of fiction, you know, be it on TV or in print, because I think it's a really interesting story. And it would be nice to hear it from Wainwright's side, but with a positive slant, because the only book sort of representation of him is in the book by the Zimbabwean writer Bettina Gupper, and she picked two of the characters from Livingstone's journey, the cook Halima, who is brilliantly portrayed, and then Wainwright is portrayed as this quite prissy, very religious, not particularly bright or brilliant person. And again, I think that's a misrepresentation. She says herself she didn't have access to a lot of the documents and research. I think he's used more as a foil to Halima, if you like. So, you know, it would be really, really brilliant if somebody would do something with this.
All right, that's just fascinating.
Africa, sorry, Lynn, one more point. What about in Africa is, say, in Malawi, for example, is this information available in Malawi?
Not yet. So there is a group I've been in touch with who are doing histories of the Yao people. So, and I did say when we'd finished, we would share it with them, hoping that they may put it on their websites. There is also a Livingston Museum in Zambia, which I will share it with. And I do have contacts. I've spent time in Malawi, so I would also look to share. One of our volunteers was from Mozambique, so he may well have places to share this, because again, this African history needs to be in Africa as well.
Okay, thank you.
Vivian, I don't know if there's anything you want to come in with. You'll have to switch your mic on.
Yes, not yet, please, not yet.
Okay, thank you. I think it's absolutely fascinating to have heard the work that you've done, because you've made several presentations, Simon, telling us about these different research projects around and about this story of David Livingstone and now the story of Jacob Wainwright, because it's really important that the stories of the African colleagues, the Black colleagues, are told, and we don't just focus on the stories of the white explorers. So, in understanding both the story of David Livingstone to an extent, I don't know an awful lot about it, but a reasonable amount, and also Henry Morton Stanley. So in Wales, we looked at his story, but this is fascinating because it's such an unexpected story that this wonderful guy, Jacob Wainwright, was able to speak English well enough to be able to present, and obviously could speak English quite well and could write it quite well, but also the amazing dedication that he showed to caring for Livingstone. And to see, I've seen a few of the pictures on the internet, and the picture of him sitting by the coffin on the boat and guarding the coffin, and it's just an amazing story, really. And then when he arrived in England, to be treated with such respect to begin with, it seems, when he was in London. He was one of the pallbearers, wasn't he? Um,
Yeah.
at the, I suppose, memorial service funeral of Livingstone. And then to have had that contact with Queen Victoria. And when you think about it, when you were saying about having maybe a book or a TV documentary. I mean, the film about Abdul, I think he was called Abdul, and Queen
Abdullah.
Victoria was just
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, but yeah, what's really, I mean, I think we've done a little bit to bring Wainwright's inner life back, but we know there's other things, there's other snippets that crop up. He traveled with a piece of bark cloth. Bark cloth is a traditional fiber in much of Africa, which has been revived. Remember, we had Jose Hendo come to speak, the Ugandan designer. He carried a piece with him. He carried Africa with him. So, and I think that's another important thing that really needs to come back to life when people say things like he internalized, and he may well have internalized some aspects of European views, but he still carried something else within him. I mean, there's even been speculation in one of the books about African explorations that he may well have pretended to have converted to Christianity.
And you also spoke about the 150th anniversary.
Yeah, sorry, I haven't
Sorry,
finished.
I'm talking over you.
Yeah. So he may well have still been a Muslim. He may well have pretended to have become Christian. So there's still a lot we don't know. And that's where I think there's more to be told about him. Viv, did you have your hand up?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, I wanted to juxtapose. Thank you so much for that presentation, because it adds to the list of what I am thinking, juxtaposing it with Africans associated with nation building and perhaps not given the attention that they deserve. And I really am grateful for this story about Wainwright, because Wainwright is a Jamaican name. We have quite a number of Jamaicans by that name, Wainwright. It's interesting for me. And also, though, I want to, Simon, look at Francis Barber. Francis Barber is a Jamaican from a place called Old Harbor. And Old Harbor, incidentally, is where the first migrants from India came in 1854, indented laborers. 1845, sorry, 1845. The Chinese came 1854 as indented laborers, but Francis Barber went to England in 1750. His freedom would have been bought, and he worked with Dr. Samuel Johnson. And that name, you can Google Dr. Dr. Johnson and Francis Barber, because he liked Francis Barber so much, he was his secretary, and left for Francis Barber, Dr. Johnson, quite a lot of money. And while I am on that, I always remember that Dr. Johnson was a very precocious child, very precocious. At age 2, his mother said to him, "Get out of the mud, you little puppy." And he said to his mother, "What is the mother of a puppy called?" And then finally, another Black person associated with a white leader. I want to remember, as Simon is speaking about Wainwright, I want to remember this morning Reverend Henry Hemans. Henry Hemans was a missionary, again from Jamaica. His memorial is at a church in Porus, Manchester, Jamaica. And on his way back to Africa, Nigeria, he met Cecil Rhodes on the boat. Reverend Hemans also had audience with Queen Victoria. But on his way back to Africa, he met Cecil Rhodes on the ship, and Cecil Rhodes told him about the scholarship that he would have been we would be establishing. And he told Cecil Rhodes, "You have to remember Jamaica. Jamaica has to be on the list." And believe it or not, the Rhodes Scholarship started in England in 1902, and by 1904, Jamaica's first Rhodes Scholar was awarded. The Rhodes Scholarship was awarded. R.M. Murray, a famous educator, went on to Oxford, returned and taught at a school called Jamaica College. And there's a poem about the Rio Grande River in Portland that I had to memorize in school. The song of a blue mountain stream in a cleft remote where white mist flows, and so on. So when you are speaking, Simon, what you are doing for us is evoking our ancestral echoes. And we are grateful to you for that, because as I said elsewhere, we are all on a relay of life. We are all on a relay of life. And every day, someone is passing a baton to us. And we thank you for sharing that baton with us this morning. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. It's been a really fascinating sort of exploration, and also what's been a real privilege is working with the young people and the volunteers who are themselves hopefully going to go on and explore some stories as well, and take some of this on. I mean, thinking of, a couple of them have said they're now going to go on and do further study in history and take this on. One's becoming a teacher. And it's really important that, these stories stay alive.
Fantastic. Sorry, how many people people have you got in the team, Simon?
We've had about 40 people altogether, but there's probably a dozen who've stayed with it for lengthy periods. And what's been really interesting is just the learning. So one who's doing the, she went up to the Livingston at 150 events because while she was studying for a PGCE, she came across some of the very old attitudes to history teaching, the negative attitudes. And so we sent her up to take part in a round table with somebody who's helping, hopefully, and somebody I'm trying to get in touch with, Liz, because he might be a speaker, because in Scotland, they've got moves underway to try and decolonize the curriculum. So we sent Natasha up to join the round table. And then our Nigerian students, when we were talking with them, and they said, you know, the big problem they had when we were talking about restitution in Nigeria, you can't go into a local museum and see your own history. And that's why our conclusion was most of this has to go back, because here, any British person can walk into a local museum and learn about history. But some things need to be in the British Museum, but not as property of the British Museum. They need to be on loan from the people of Nigeria, on loan from the people of Jamaica. And that helps change the attitudes. And so, you know, that's been really important learning for us.
You said on loan from Jamaica?
There are things from the Caribbean in the British Museum, in the Africa room.
There is nothing we have that from 1066, I have been serving on committees and boards, and I know of nothing that is on loan.
No, it should be.
Museum.
It should be.
I'm referring to 1799, when the Taino, our first inhabitants, their religious objects were removed from a cave in what is now Manchester, and when the British Museum was opened, they were sent to the British Museum, because that was before the opening of the British Museum.
Yep.
And also, you should know that Hans Sloane, who lived in Spanish Town, he was governor of the Duke of Albemarle, who lived in Port Royal, 1689. He had a ton loads of things which were taken to England. And again, his collection was used for the founding collection of the British Museum.
Yeah.
So the word loan is very heavy for me.
That's what I'm saying. What our conclusion was from our discussion in the museum was these things should be first sent back, and then the people can decide whether or not to loan them, but they should never be property of the British Museum.
I wish you luck.
It will take some time, but I think, you know, it's irreversible.
Well, Simon, I am so glad that these are not the days when you will be sent to the tower and returned bereft of your heads.
I've had many.
You're wonderful, Simon.
Well, I think what's really interesting recently with the uncovering of the thefts that have gone on from the British Museum, that, you know, all credibility of the British Museum to be capable of you know, being a bit holier than thou about being able to care for artifacts rather than them go back to other parts of the world where they came from, and suggesting they might not have been looked after as well. I think their credibility is completely shot now. So I think, you know, I'd look to a future where museums could look very, very different. And we've really got to crack that, because the museums, the colonialisation in its all its glory. I can't think of a word other than glory, but I don't mean glory. That there are so many things that have been taken from every single part of the world, and the museums have got such massive collections stashed away in their archives, and they never see the light of day. So why can't they go back?
And this is one of the things, you know, from our discussion at the British Museum. There are I think it's 10 times as many things from
Yeah.
Africa in storage as there are on display.
Yeah.
So why not send them back?
Yes, I think we ought to maybe in our autumn series we want to do more about the empire. Then I thought, and maybe we ought to have some of these curators come and talk to us about what they're doing about returning things. We did do some more. Vivian.
Yes, thank you. Simon and Liz, you're speaking about sending back. In the 1930s, the Institute of Jamaica requested of the British Museum to return the objects. And what the British Museum did was to send replicas. So in Jamaica now we have replicas. So again, I wish you luck, but luck means living under correct knowledge.
I think that's lovely, living under correct knowledge, yes.
And that's a good point at which I have to go in a couple of minutes to go and do the school run. So thank you all for listening.
Yeah.
See you all
Well,
next
thank
week.
you so much.
you, Simon.
Absolutely fantastic,
Wainwright.
Simon.
Yes,
Really,
Jacob
really
Wainwright,
important
yes,
project.
Livingston.
Really important project.
Thanks, Simon. Cheers. Yep.
Thanks very much indeed, Simon. Thank you. Okay, wow. Well, that was just brilliant to know, and it's so fascinating because Belong is an organisation that supports asylum seekers and refugees, people in the community in Nottingham, and engaging people in these projects is doing so much for the local community. I think it's really, really remarkable. So, yeah, that was really wonderful. Thanks, Simon. And if some of you weren't so good on thinking for the recording, if some of you aren't too good on the hearing it, then just make the effort because it was really, really fascinating. Right, so we're going to move on to the next thing that we're up to today, and that is let me get my PowerPoint again organised. Whiz past that, and is to look at what we could do in what we're calling the Windrush series, our Black History Conversations Windrush series 2024. Now, last year we tracked the story of Empire Windrush from Jamaica, the date that it left. I think it's the 22nd, isn't it? Of sorry, I've got the wrong. No, it's the 22nd. I think it was of May. I'm not sure. You'll correct me.
We did check those days, didn't we, Liz? We did check those dates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we thought it was sensible. It arrives the 22nd of June is the date, is Windrush Day. And then we thought we'd give ourselves a week afterwards to talk about all the things that had gone on during Windrush Day activities and things. So we start kind of a week before we I can't speak tonight. Sorry, it's the week before the sort of departure, so we can hear about what's happening in Jamaica. So I'm going to ask you, Vivian, in a minute to tell us a bit about that. Then about the departure. So it would be great because we can have a talk about that and see, referring back to the passengers. And then the following week it's a bank holiday, so I'm not sure whether we ought to do a session or not because some of us aren't celebrating your bank holiday. We have our own to celebrate. And then we've got a few weeks then to tell other stories. And so we've got a number of people who we'd like to involve. So I'm just going to tell you before we go into discussing that. We've got 3 more sessions before the end of season 12. We may or may not do the 19th, I'm not sure. But then at the beginning of season 13, we have the auspicious 150th edition of Black History Conversations. So we really need to be thinking about what we can do then. So it'll either, depending on whether we do the May Bank holiday and whether we do the 19th of July, it may be that we may be further into Black History Month, but the 150th one will come during Black History Month. So that's what we're up to at the moment. So I'm just going to note these dates down while you're all thinking of what sort of things we can do to talk about Windrush. And obviously, Garrick, maybe if you talk first, I'm just writing these down so I can make some notes. What do you think, Garrick, about the campaign for Justice for Windrush Generations being entwined as a thread that goes all the way through this?
Absolutely, it has to be entwined because this issue is still alive, and we're very concerned with the number of people not coming forward, because clearly the way the Home Office present itself and deal with people are reluctant to identify themselves and come forward. So that's a real issue. But we have to continue the campaign. And what's important is the messaging that we're putting out. We have to change the narrative, as we've been doing, to make sure that people understand Windrush is a global issue, not a Caribbean issue. It's affecting 65 countries. That's a lot of country. And so, let's not just focus on Caribbean or Jamaicans. But even with the Caribbean, we're not seeing the numbers coming forward. And we have major issues with Asian and Africans not connecting themselves with Windrush. So the messaging needs to continue. And politically, what we're now doing is bringing Windrush agenda into the post office Horizon scandal, to make sure that people understand, because we're looking at equity and why is one scandal being dealt with in this way and another scandal is dealt with in that way. So those are the issues that we're now focusing on.
Thank you, Garrick. I'm wondering, Vivian. We've got Gillian Allen joining us.
After you, Liz.
Vivian, do you know what's happening? When's the Archbishop of Canterbury coming over, or whoever's coming?
He will be at the week of the third week in July. He will be he'll be the celebrating preacher at the service to be held at the National Arena on Sunday, the 21st of July at 9 o'clock. Yours truly is a part of the 200th anniversary commemoration. I think elsewhere they call it celebration, but I like the word commemoration.
There's nothing to celebrate.
And instead, I don't want to be sent to the principal's office.
Yeah.
So the Archbishop will be here. I was last night at the National Council on Reparations committee meeting, and we found that there are some of the church organizations. The Reformed United Church has tendered a public apology. You'll recall, Liz, they were in Jamaica last month, and you had asked me sometime during our discussion to give an overview of what that service was like. So not to rush, I have the information, but apology doesn't seem to be an easy term. And I inquired last night, why is apology difficult? And then the lawyer on the committee told me that concomitant with the word apology, there is a liability. So people shy away from that word.
Yes.
The moment you say you apologize, you are culpable, and therefore there is a liability, financial liability.
Yeah.
So there we are with that.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that. So the Archbishop of Canterbury is coming in July, the third week in July, the 21st. He'll be in
Yes,
Jamaica.
please.
And
Okay.
we had speakers from the church commission. And so the church in Jamaica, the Anglican church, is obviously going over, and it's a what anniversary is it? The 200th
The
anniversary.
200th anniversary of the diocese, that is a bishop being in Jamaica for the first time. Before that, from 1665, when they came, 1670, when they 66, when they set up the Anglican Church, the Bishop of Jamaica was in London. So in 1824, Christopher Lipscomb arrived in Jamaica. And this is interesting, Liz, that you raised the point, because on the 1st of August, 1838, he was at the Declaration of Emancipation in Spanish Town Square. He came with a group from the cathedral, a procession, and J. Filippo, the Baptist minister, Spanish Town, he was the one who, when he arrived in Jamaica, did not get a license to preach. The Baptist minister, when you go to Jamaica, you visit Spanish Town, you must go to Filippo Baptist Church, because on the grounds there, they buried the implements of slavery. But also, in terms of magnanimity, that was the gentleman who took his own money, 50 pounds, and established the first free village in Jamaica, Sligoville. And what he did, he cut up the property into small lots, and the enslaved, soon to be freed, this was in 1835, were able to buy their little lots and pay him over time. I find it very, 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 very odd, strange that the property was not named after Filippo, but under the governor's name, Sligo, Governor Sligo.
Oh yes, yeah.
And
Gosh,
the rather lame reason given was that Sligo did not support what the planters were doing. He was more on the side of the enslaved, so that's why it's named after him. I would have to swallow that with something else, because in my own district, Moortown, Mooreton, where Nanny is buried, my ancestors told me that the spelling should be More. Nanny wanted more lands, so that's why it was called Moortown, More.
You're correct. My grandmother told me that story.
Excellent.
Yeah, you're correct. Yeah.
So
and she was a maroon. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. But what the colonials did, they named it after the governor, Governor Moore, Moore.
Yep.
So when you come to the Liz Millman School, you learn everything.
No, it's the Dr. Vivian Crawford Academy, I tell you. Gillian,
Simon, you can't leave. Simon, you can't leave.
Pause, everybody. I'm just going to ask Gillian. Gillian, hi, how are you?
Hello. I'm just listening into the conversation. I just to the recording of last week's about language, Jamaican language.
Yeah.
I was interested. I was a teacher in Jamaica. I now live in Exeter in England.
Oh yes, yeah.
I was a teacher in Jamaica, and there was nothing that got the staff room going like the discussion of where the patois should be taught.
Where in Jamaica were you, Gillian?
mainly at Manchester High School.
Oh, Manchester High School.
Yes,
Are
yes.
you aware that that is the oldest school foundation in Jamaica?
No, I didn't know that.
Yes. Yes, it was established by a Rainis White
Okay.
from there in Clarendon in the 1690s. And
Oh, God.
because of conflict for deadlift and fighting over deadlift, the school wasn't established until about in the 1850s, 60s, Manchester High. But
Okay.
notwithstanding what Woolmers will tell you and Mannings will tell you.
Yes, I thought they were older.
And Gillian, you have a Minister of Health now from Manchester High, Tufton.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
In fact, I was given his book for Christmas, his book,
Oh,
State of Mind.
good.
How long were you in Jamaica, Gillian?
27 years.
Whoa.
Then Gillian, not even a little patois.
That's why.
Why you say? Gillian, why you say?
No, I don't sound
Gillian.
But I echo what Liz Millman said last week, that when I tried to speak patois, my family didn't like it. They laughed at me.
Yeah. No, they laugh with you.
Yeah.
No, they didn't like it at all. So I never mastered it.
Right, really interesting, Gillian. Gillian, would you mind putting your email address in the chat, and then I can make sure you're on the mailing list?
Yes, I have put it in before, previous week.
Have you?
Yeah.
Do you get the mailings then, Gillian? No,
I don't.
No, put it in again, because there's something going on, and I don't understand. I think we're actually missing some of the, because I've got various mailing lists, and I think some of them have been disconnected somehow, so we'll have to see. So if you don't mind, please, Gillian, I'd be very grateful. Well, what a wonderful story. Right, I'm just going to welcome Ivor. Ivor's joining us from Pennants, Jamaica. Ivor, that was such an interesting session yesterday.
Yes, indeed. I didn't get all of it. I didn't get all of it. I came on late. I didn't get all of it. I came on late. I didn't get all of it.
But it was a really useful meeting. And if you can, Ivor, for next week's meeting on Thursday, can you get as many people to attend as possible? Because we're going to be talking about something really special, but we can't kind of talk about it in advance. But I'll give you a bit of a hint. You know the gentleman who joined us? Did you see a gentleman who's not been on before called John Lloyd?
John Lloyd? No.
He was on the screen when you joined.
Okay.
But he's going to tell us more about his particular interest, and his particular interest is really pretty special. So can you have a word with Lorna and Clifford and the others and see if we can't get as many people from Pennants joining us next week, because John's going to explain what his interest and his link is, and I think you'll find it really useful.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, I'm just writing down talk.net. Talk.
I start campaigning from now.
Yeah, so let's see what we can do, please. I'd be very, very grateful. As I say, he's going to join us next Thursday. Roland, it's lovely that you've joined us too. All right. We're just going to get back now to the thing we were talking about how we plan and who we can include. So, Joan, I'm going to ask you first. What ideas have you got for sessions that we could do that are related in some way to the Windrush story?
I think, I mean, I'm not sure how. I mean, given we're all in different places, I'm not sure. I think we in England just have one day. I'm open to correction on that. As far as I know,
But what we're doing is we're
I would,
allocating 8 sessions to talk about Windrush because we think it's important.
I mean, I've got a couple of comments. So, I have been doing my little local history of here in Dublin 10, and so obviously we had this inverted commas race riot of 1958. So, I mean, David Watsit's done good work on who the Windrush migrants were, what skills they had, you know, what they hoped they would bring to Britain. I think as possibly one event looking at who were the Windrush migrants, what they would bring, whether we've got any survivors left who can speak, I don't know, but something about who they were and what they have, how basically the aim actually was to help Britain. They came to help rebuild Britain, which was obviously then devastated. So possibly an event, whether we want to do multiple events or a series of events, but I mean, clearly my personal interest is very much in who the Windrush immigrants were. But there's other things that we can do. You clearly can then do the contemporary stuff and the whole, you know, compensation and the problems and so on. But in England or in London, certainly, I would imagine we probably only do one event. But whether, you know, we may want to do 3 or 4 every 4 weeks, as you suggest, and we can pick on different themes. So that would be those are my current thoughts.
What we're thinking of doing, Joan, is that we're thinking of I'm just going to stop this as a, sorry, let me just stop sharing this and then I can get into the one that I can type on. Just a minute, it takes me a minute, I'm a bit slow at the minute. Right, okay. So I'm just going back into that again. Right, here we are then. So this we're calling it the Windrush Series 2024. So we're going to do, we might not do the bank holiday Friday, but we might. So that'll be one, we'll miss that out at the moment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 sessions of Black History Conversations we're going to dedicate to things to do with Windrush. Now, after your comment, Garrick, I thought in the first session, maybe you could do something about the 65 countries.
Yeah. What date is that?
That's the 17th of the 5th.
Oh, unfortunately, I won't be able to.
You're not around then, are you?
Yeah, because my mom is here. So from the 7th of June, I'm back. I'm okay.
From the 7th of June?
Yeah, she leave on the 7th. Yeah.
Do you want to do something on the 7th or do you want to leave it
the week after, the 14th would be ideal.
All right. So Garrick and Roland and oh, now we've got the problem with my keyboard. Just a minute. Let me just get organized here. Can you see this, folks?
Yeah, we're seeing what you're doing. Yeah. Yeah, the missing key. Yeah.
Yes, the missing key, which was I've got a keyboard on my lap. So if you do something about the 65 countries, because I think that 65, not that, 65 countries, it just would really make the point that we are talking about this particular group of people, you know, the Windrush ship, the Empire Windrush, and we're talking about the recognition that's been given in Britain with Windrush Day. But what you're saying is that you know, there were people from 65 countries around the world who came to Britain.
So the Commonwealth country is 56 in total, and then there's 9 British overseas protective territories that make the 65. Include the Falklands.
Yeah, so the 65 countries are our Commonwealth and what are
Yes.
the other?
British Overseas Protective Territories.
I might ask if it would be appropriate for me just to do a little slot there, because I don't think people realise in this context that the British government were busy promoting the I can't think of the word, promoting that white British people went to live in other parts of the world where they were trying to establish a very British white society, very British, but definitely white society. Because here in Australia, there were 1 million white British workers, you know, husbands, wives, families, who came to Australia to build Australia, really. But then you think about the white British people who went to Canada, and although the US isn't counted as being part of the Commonwealth or anything, I'm not sure how many white British people left for the US, but they certainly left for South Africa, like Rhodesia and
yes,
Kenya,
Kenya,
other parts of the world, Kenya. So I think that story's, to me, is quite relevant, because if you're telling the story that, you know, which we know, that in 1948 Britain was devastated after the Second World War and needed workers. So if they needed workers, why was the British government busy trying to get as many white British people out to other parts of the world? So it's a really, I think it's a really interesting dilemma, because when you look at Australian history and Australian Black history, I mean, it's just appalling the way that the British came into the country and how they, well, basically they considered the native people, the first Australians, to be nothing, and then went on and on and on, and different policies, white British policy. Vivian, you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, while you're exploring about the presentations, I ask that you consider if it's, the possibility of having a presenter to speak on the subject of colonial education. And I say that because here it is in the Windrush, the people who were brought back to help with the restoration of Britain, what was the educational qualification? What did Britain leave behind? And I am saying that because Professor Jeffrey Palmer told me that when he arrived, he was put in a class for almost disabled children.
Subnormal, that was the term they call it, yeah.
Abnormal.
Yeah.
And he became the first Black person to be a professor at a Scottish university.
Yeah.
And I have said on this program before that the parish of Trelawney did not get a high school until in the 1970s, because the educational policy was that the boys at age 15 when they leave school should go and cut cane. So I would really like a discussion on the colonial education policy and the legacy that was left behind. We are grateful for teachers from all over the world. But when I went to the MICO, the high schools in Jamaica, there were only 2 Jamaicans who were principals. All the other principals came from overseas. because of the woefully inadequate educational policy, including paying fees to go to elementary, primary school, which my grandmother did. She told me that she couldn't go to school on a Friday because she had to go to the field to get goods to walk 10 miles to go and sell to pay her school fees. So I would like some discussion on that.
Yeah. And incidentally, Vivian, also Professor Gus John had a similar, because that was the focus of his work in education in acne. And again, you know, the educational subnormal, that was the term used.
Yes, very much so. What I'm thinking about is that the week that's is the bank holiday week, we might be able to get some of the Jamaican teachers in the UK to come on and speak, because there's a big issue at the moment about the fact that that Britain's been out and about recruiting teachers from overseas, and a number of Jamaican teachers have been recruited again. Now, I was involved with supporting teachers who came in I think around 2000. No, maybe it was later than that. But there were a group of teachers came into Sandwell, Jamaican teachers, and they were actually treated really badly. But Natalie Fagan-Brown's one of those teachers who came in, and I'm sure that she or some of the other teachers would speak to us, and we can raise some of these issues. So, Vivian, have you got somebody over there who could speak on this colonial education issue, or do you want to do it?
No. I would love to hear somebody from the UK side, because they would be able to, as Gary's saying, to put into the mix their experience there. I would really, you know, if it could come from the UK side, the presenter.
And what's interesting, Gillian, is that you're with us because at one stage there must have been, well, we know perfectly well, and it went back a long way, but I think there was a revival of asking white British people to go over and teach in Jamaica, probably at the time that you went. And I know my friend Mary Nelson went over, and she met her husband Rudy, and that's the story of history. So, Gillian, when did you go over to Jamaica to teach?
I went to Jamaica with my Jamaican husband to be in 1972.
Yeah.
Most of the teachers at Manchester High School were expatriates when I started. But when the Jamaican dollar devalued a lot in the, about 76 or something like that, most of the expatriates left.
That was the period with Norman Manley. That was, you know, the 70s. Yeah.
It was Michael Manley.
Michael Manley, yes.
Yes. And after that, I was one of the only expatriates in the schools, different schools where I taught.
And when did you retire from Manchester High School?
Well, I left Jamaica in 1995.
Whoa!
Yeah, quite a long time ago now.
We expect to see you early.
That's amazing, yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Oh,
so I'm thinking, around 72, which would have been the same time. Sadly, my friend Mary Nelson's passed now, but she went out to Jamaica to teach. So there must have been at that stage an attitude that as you say, expats, but British people would go out and teach in different places, and would also go out and be vicars in different places. And that idea of teachers going for that purpose, and that was quite different to the say the bringing of white people to Australia to work. It was quite a different way. So, Gillian, when you went out to Jamaica, did you know that you got a job?
No, I didn't want to be a teacher, but it was what I could get a work permit for. And there were very few other opportunities, so I became a teacher.
And did you train as a teacher?
I did once I was in Jamaica. I did a diploma in education at Mona campus in
the West Indies.
Yeah, that's right. Which I enjoyed very much. But I have to say, when I returned to England, they refused to acknowledge my qualification.
I know all about that. We all know all about that.
But why would it be? Because it's an international university.
Well,
established by England. Established by England.
No, and it was following a British syllabus with half of the lecturers being British, but they wouldn't accept it here in England. So I could never get a proper job as a teacher in Exeter here when I came back.
Well, that's quite interesting what you've just said, Gillian, because that's exactly the situation with the Windrush nurses arriving in the UK. They were qualified nurses, matron, and they had to start at the bottom. So the qualification was of no value to them. In other words, you need to go back to school and start again. But it was the same British syllable, same education system that was established by Britain, and yet it's not accepted when you try to use it.
Yes, it's like in the novel Small Island.
Yes,
the same situation that happened to the heroine in that story. That
correct.
Her teaching qualification wasn't accepted.
Yeah.
So I'm quite interested in these schemes which brought Jamaican teachers to England that you were just talking about, and whether they're properly employed under proper conditions or what.
Well, this was the big problem when this first big group came over to Sandwell, that they were offered a really what they thought was a good package, but when they actually arrived, they'd got dreadful accommodation, and also they were expected to retrain. So that particular group undertook teacher training, and I think it's Garrick, I think it's an important part of the Windrush story that I know it's not about. It is about a justice issue, but the current bunch that they've recruited, I can't remember where they've recruited them into just at the moment, but they've recruited them and they are going to accept their qualifications, apparently. Which is quite remarkable, because from my personal experience, I would say that Jamaican teachers are better trained than British teachers. I mean, considering they, have such limited access to resources, and they're so imaginative in how they get round. And I've been to Manchester High School. I knew the principal there, Gasford, can't remember his other name. Anyway, and just an absolutely amazingly wonderful school. I've got the most wonderful photographs of it. I'll have to share them with you, Gillian, at some stage if I can find them. Anyway, we're rambling here.
Right, what you just said, Liz, so accepting the qualification now is one thing, but here comes the other issue in terms of pay and condition.
Yes,
Because what will happen, they will be on a different pay scale until somebody find out that, you're on a different salary to myself.
Well, I mean, I think it's a Jamaica Teachers Association issue. We need to involve them, but also
Yes.
the British teaching unions, because these people are coming into the UK and they need to be if they're willing to come and teach, they need to be embraced by our teaching unions, and our teaching unions in the UK need to be making sure that they've got good conditions of service and
Yes.
good support. So I think that could be a really useful session. Thank you to you both. I'm going to ask David Gleave now. Well, David, are you there? David? Or Joan?
Sorry, no, sorry, just had to get off on mute.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Well, some of the things that have been talked about there are very interesting. I know that Roxanne is still active in the Croydon National Education Union, and I have heard her talking about some of the issues that Jamaican teachers have faced in Croydon recently. There was an event, I think, that Croydon NEU put on specifically for that group of teachers, but I think they didn't attend, I think because they were in a situation, I think, where they might have been being bullied in their schools and they were actually a bit scared to attend. Now, I'm paraphrasing all of that and I may have got it quite wrong, but I think Roxanne does know something about the issues that you're talking about there.
It would be useful if we could sort of get a panel together, and then we can lead a discussion about this, and we can know what areas we want to explore into. I think it would be really useful. David, why I wanted to speak to you though, is that you've done so much work with your wonderful and recorded on the website, which is called
Historical Roots. Historical Roots.
Yeah. Sorry, like it is at 12 here, remember, in the night. So Historical Roots. So, and I know that you work with Bill, and he's done work on the Windrush. He's published a book. As if we both published this book.
He hasn't actually. Well, there was a book that I forget the exact title. It was something like Windrush 75. He actually wrote about 90% of the content, but it's available. I believe it's available as a free download online via the Windrush Foundation. So Bill did most of the writing for that. So he is exceptionally well informed about the passengers on the Windrush, where they went to, what they got up to. I know one of you. There was a question earlier about are there any of them still alive, but I think there are quite a few Windrush passengers who are still alive, but they came as children. Quite a few white children on board the Windrush are still alive. A couple of people I know that John Richards is still alive. John, I think, is 96 now.
Yes.
I don't think he'd be able to speak. I don't think you could have him as an attendee, but John is still around. Peter Dealhern, who I know Bill got very friendly with, was a part of the team providing the food on board. So Peter Dealhern, I think, was in the bakery on the ship, and he had a fascinating story to tell. Unfortunately, he passed 2 or 3 months ago, I think. So, but Bill got very friendly with him, and he could certainly talk about him. So there are various aspects that, if you wanted to talk about passengers, Bill is, very knowledgeable on the subject.
What about if we did that? Because in those weeks before the Empire Windrush departed, there were so many. Bill Hearn is called. Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. It's called Bill Hearn, Hear.
No, Hern.
Thanks so much. Yeah, cheers. Thanks. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Where was I? Losing my place. So I think because in those first weeks before the Empire, when the advert went out, I mean, there were so many decisions to be made. People wanting to take the opportunity, but what were the implications for their family, for their children? And so maybe for that, the 17th of the 5th, which is the first week of the series, if we invite Bill and he can do that date, and to tell us about I mean, he's spoken to us before, but if he can update us on his research and tell us some of the stories again. And then Vivian, what I'm thinking about then is that on the 24th, which is a Friday, I don't think it's the actual date that you'll be doing events to do with the departure. I don't think it's. Do you know what date the departure events are going to happen, Vivian? Or while you're looking that up, you can see that. So then we can do the departure things. And then Joan, do you want to speak and talk about stories? Like to do.
I'm not enough of an expert, and my focus has been very much local. I'm just literally Googling Bill Hearn right now. No, I don't think I'm qualified to speak at this point, but I do want to do my little thing that we talked about, maybe July or maybe September. Remember, I said I'd send you my little booklet. I will do that. But I don't think I'm ready to speak at this point.
Right, I think we could. Just a minute. Let me look at my PowerPoints. I'm sharing the screen with you so you can see what I'm up to. When we finished, what about in July? Would you like to do your session then, or would you prefer to leave it till September?
It depends on when I get some teeth. I've just managed to knock out both of my front teeth. I'm waiting for a denture. I think I'm going to get it. Wait a minute, where are we? I think I'm going to get it. Let's say, for argument's sake, the end of June. I don't think I want to do anything until I've got some front teeth.
You've been fighting. Have you been fighting? Have you?
No, I haven't been fighting. Both my
fighting at school.
No, I'm a good girl. My front trans came off, but actually, funnily enough, one of them broke at a Windrush event. But that's another story. But anyway, yeah. I mean, I won't. So I'm seeing the last one is what's that saying, 16th or something of July. If I've got teeth, I might do it then, but otherwise, I will leave it till September. Okay. I'll let you know fairly soon. I will know.
To say the 27th of September, and then you'll be looking gorgeous again, dear, and you'll be able to.
Well, possibly, certainly by. I mean, as far as I know, as far as from memory, I should get it like the end of June. So that one that you've got there, so say 19th of July. I mean, that's a possibility, but otherwise, early September, if possible. So
I'll put Joan down as possibility.
Okay, thanks. Okay, cheers. Thanks.
Joan again.
I will let you know as soon as I have got slightly more clarity as to when I'm going to get it.
That's fine. So we'll just, have you penciled in, and then we can.
Cool. Thanks. Okay, cool.
That's about. It's about your. What part of London do you cover?
We're Notting Hill. We're Notting Hill.
I mean, it'd be interesting to know which Windrush passengers might ended up in Notting Hill. I mean, obviously, everybody always talks about Brixton, and lots of them headed to Clapham and Brixton. But I mean, there were Windrush passengers who went to all corners of Britain, really, and some of them must have gone to Notting Hill.
You would have think we've got a few. I mean, yeah, my thing is sort of 1920s to sort of 1960s. So, as I've said before, I'm looking at that whole period of what world did black migrants come into. So I'm looking at Notting Hill, which was then, a poor suburb. No one. All this is now forgotten. Well, it's not forgotten by people like you who know, but a lot of people don't know this history now because the area is all gentrified, etc. So I'm looking at that period. If there are, I'm interested in the Windrush migrants, but clearly they're not the whole story. There's another whole decade of Caribbean migration. So I'm focusing locally because obviously it's quite a big topic, and I just we can only do so much. So I'm just looking locally, but that is my sort of thing. Is that whole period between the 20s, or sort of So after the First World War to the mid 60s, basically.
So is it? Well, that sounds okay because we can cover what we cover as and when we can. We don't have to.
Joan, that would cover Claudia Jones' period in Notting Hill.
Well, that's right. The beginnings. I mean, it's like there's the right. There's the beginnings of carnival. There's actual carnival. There's all sorts of stuff that's gone on here. There's Peter Rackman. There's all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's fairly interesting. But yes, indeed, Claudia. I mean, I don't know an awful lot about Claudia Jones, but she does have the first carnival events after, immediately after the riots. I mean, I don't even call them riots. To me, they're just a bit of a fisticuffs. We've got people from outside the area coming in looking for trouble, on a bank holiday. They're not local people. Studies have shown that they were not local people. I'm not suggesting that the local people were saints by any means, but the rioters, inverted commas, were not local. The person who killed Kelso Cochrane, by the way, he was local. But the riot, as I said, riot to me is overstated. It was just sort of fisticuffs on a bank holiday, frankly, and people sort of throwing stuff and shouting names. It wasn't riot is, I think, an exaggeration, really. But anyway, yeah, thanks, yeah.
Right, just coming back to Vivian now. Did you work out anything, Vivian? You have to mute yourself.
24th of June, you said?
Yeah.
What about that date?
Sorry, the 24th of the 5th. I was asking when the Empire Windrush left, and when are you doing your celebrations for the departure this year? Are you doing
I'm afraid
anything?
I don't know about that arrangement.
Oh, right, okay.
Can I just chip in? Can I just chip in one other idea? I mean, I'm sure you all know this. I mean, there was also this thing that, we've got the Attlee government at this point in 49, but apparently, I'm sure you know this, that he had this idea to divert it to East Africa or something, and have the passengers picking peanuts in Kenya. I mean, that's in David Olusoga's book, I think I'm right to say. But I don't know whether you want to do anything on that sort of side. This is clearly a bit of a sideline, but I mean, that was the Labour government was not any more in favour of Caribbean migration than the Tories were.
That is true. That's well documented.
Yeah. Well, that's another possibility then. So I'm writing things down in my book as well as on the screen. We also last time did something on people left behind, and the implications. Makapi Selassie did us a fantastic session on his family, and the difficulties of the people who came over later. I tell you who we could ask to join us. And that's Jeff Palmer, as you mentioned earlier. And I think it would be really good to ask Jeff to join us. He's not spoken to us lately, but it would be great to involve him in the series, and his experience of coming to the UK and acknowledging him. And we can also, we've got awards that we give to people who've done amazing work in terms of Black history, and we've only done 3 so far. We have 1 recipient with us, Dr. Vivian Crawford, but it would be nice to invite Jeff Palmer. He's just amazing. So David, have you got any other bright ideas of how you or Roxanne might like to contribute? Can't hear you, David.
I know. Sorry, I go on mute, and then I have to struggle to find how to unmute. I don't. No, nothing.
I saw it. Yes, I saw it.
Nothing specific has come to mind.
There were 65 applicants.
No, I'm going to go back on mute.
Yeah. Okay. And Vivian,
I was a little surprised because I thought at least something could be awarded, even if you didn't get what you wanted, something. So what were
Garrick doing his business? Right. Okay, Vivian, unmute yourself and tell me if you think there are any other things that we might not have thought about in order to inform ourselves better about that.
Yeah, I in Jamaica they have an expression, at least, which says, "Don't start me up."
I'm starting you up, dear.
Don't start me up, because I want to look at some Jamaicans who contributed to nation building in the UK and are perhaps forgotten as though they had never been. Marcus Garvey died in the United Kingdom. Then there is Dr. Moody, and Dr. Moody, and he studied at King's College, came first in the class and couldn't get a job. And then his brother, Ronald, whose sculpture work is in the National Portrait Gallery. I'm thinking of our Senator Barbara Blake Hannah, first Black British reporter. I am just from the colonies, you know, these people forgotten as they had never been. I looked the other day with pride because I am on the committee, I told you, for the 200th commemoration of the bishopric of Jamaica. And so we're the master of the King's music at Hampton Court. Carl Jackson, his mother is from St. Anne's Bay in Jamaica, where Marcus Garvey was born. He's master of the King's music. And Dr. Shirley Thompson, Professor Shirley Thompson, a famous composer, has composed music for the Queen, Her Majesty, etc., etc. So I just want us to, if we could have a reflection on some of these people. I spoke earlier about Francis Barber, who was the assistant to Dr. Johnson, and etc., etc. And I spoke about Hemans with Cecil Rhodes, etc., etc. So there we go. There are these people forgotten as though they had never been. Bob Marley lived in England too. Yes, so I said, don't start me up, I can't finish.
I think that's a really, really good point. And it needs to be given a bit more thought. I think we need
Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Elizabeth Barrett Browning, that poem, How Do I Love Thee? Her people are from Trelawney, Falmouth.
Yeah. I think we need to differentiate the people who were earlier than 1948 and the people who were post.
Yes, we can.
So when did Marcus Garvey die?
1940 in England. Right. But finally,
so it may be that we could.
But I wanted a balance
in the future about that. Yeah,
I wanted a balance because there were some British who came here, and they lived and died in Jamaica. When you go to Flagstaff in St. James, when you're in Trelawney, you are seeing it. There is a memorial. There is a cemetery there of British soldiers, and I don't think many British people know that. But for me, one of the highlights is that the judge who convicted King Charles I to be hanged, he is not buried in Westminster Abbey because his son removed his remains when King Charles II ascended the throne. When is it? 1650, whatever. Because Charles I is 1649. And he, knowing what would happen, he had his father's remains removed from Westminster Abbey, and those remains are now in Trelawney by the Martha Brae River at a space called Gun Point. So on the other hand, I want to say that we need to see the British connection, here, because I understand it's Bishop Christopher Lipscomb is buried at St. Andrew Parish Church, and their descendants, when they come, they will want to say, oh, what goes on here? Lord Nelson spent a year in Jamaica, and he lived in Cooper's Hill. It's now a private home in Jamaica. He lived in Port Royal. So we just need to see the mix. So we want to look at it on both sides.
That's absolutely fascinating. Now I'm going to try and pack some of those stories apart. Gillian, you come back on, but also Joan's got a hand up. Gillian first.
Just to report that in this far corner of England, because this is rural Devon, we have an organisation called Devon Development Education, And every year we do Windrush events because there are descendants of Windrush taking the Windrush generation as being from about 1947 to 1960. There are people of Caribbean origin that are fairly few and far between here, but through our Windrush events, they've come to know that there are other Caribbean people living in the area, and it's been a great boost to them. So
that's really interesting. Yeah.
So another aspect of Windrush is that people have spread out to the far corners of England. And we commemorate Windrush down here. We have a flag raising ceremony at County Hall on Windrush Day.
Well, I think that's really interesting because I'm based in North Wales when I'm back in the UK. And in North Wales, there are few and far between Jamaicans. And actually, Garrick, who's here, is the chair of the North Wales Jamaica Society. And we also celebrate Windrush, and we're getting people involved. So that's really helpful. Thank you very much indeed, Gillian. Joan.
I was just going to say that Marcus Garvey's, I'm not sure whether she's a wife one or wife two, but one of his wives, Amy Garvey, even she lived literally 100 yards from where I live.
Really?
But all in that region. She also was involved in sort of, after the riots, kind of trying to heal and reconcile and all this sort of stuff. I did look in the National Archives for this, but I couldn't find much about it. But certainly his I think he divorced wife one. I think she's the one who lived in what is Bassett Road, literally the next street from me, basically. So anyway, she definitely lived here for a while. So if you're doing something on Marcus Garvey, other sort of interwar black people, whatever, she's around here. I mean, there has been work done. I mean, certainly. Peter Fry's got quite a comprehensive list of black people sort of in that interwar period, as does David Dudar. I never know whether it's Olusegun or Ellis Olusegun, but anyway, whichever it is, he has done good stuff as well. And there were black people, sort of doctors, lawyers, all sorts of people in the interwar, entertainers as well. And indeed, there were all sorts of people all across Britain and London, and of course there were the two settled communities of Liverpool and Cardiff. I mean, there was the race riots of 1919 in Cardiff and Liverpool. So that history is there. Whether we want to do that with Windrush is another story. But we know that black people have a longer presence in Britain than just Windrush.
Yeah. I mean, I bit my tongue earlier, so as not to mention a footballer, but Tony Collins. Tony Collins, quite a very important black footballer. He was born in I think Notting Hill in 1920 something or other. So I fully support the idea that there's been a black presence in Britain long before the Windrush, and that we shouldn't forget about it.
We definitely shouldn't. I don't know if any of you joined the session when Atinuka presented her book, Brilliant Black British History. And if you haven't seen it, I can't just easily get hold of my copy of it here. So her name's Atinuka, Atinuke, Atinuka. She's a Nigerian living in South Wales, and she's written this children's book, which is called Brilliant Black British History. And she talks about the fact that Cheddar Man was black.
Cheddar Man.
Absolutely fascinating information that she's come together with, and then it brings it right up to date. So as a children's book, that's just an amazing one. So yes, Black British history has existed since then, and we can recognise all those stories and look at individual stories. But this is about specifically anything to do with the big influx of people who came from 65 countries into Britain after the Second World War. So that's what we're focusing on for this. But yes, then we can look at other people who came into Britain. But we also, I mean, fascinating though Black British history is, Black History Conversations is about worldwide history. Okay, so Ivor says he's leaving this wonderful meeting now. That's lovely, Ivor, and we'll involve you all the way through with all these things that we do. Thank you for joining us from Penance, Jamaica, Ivor, and see you next Thursday with the whole crowd. All right. Right, okay then. So we've had an offer from Beverly Previtt, and I can't remember her last name. She's going to do something about the research that she did. And all the best, Gillian. I've got your email now. Stay in touch with us, Gillian, please. Please stay in touch with us.
Yes,
Okay.
I will. Thank you.
Bye. And also, Juanita Cox has done a significant research report interviewing many people who've experienced the challenges of proving their citizenship. And then finally on my little list, I've got Rosemary, whose other name I can't remember as well. And she's the head teacher, is retired, but written a book about people from the armed services. And I think that's one thing, David, that perhaps and others of you want to remember. Okay, Garrick, you're last then, and then oh no, Roland's going to say
I'm just going to ask Roland to come in, Liz, because you mentioned just before about the children that was left behind, sometime known as the barrel children. So Nadine White has done some work on this. I'll just let Roland actually tell you a little bit about that, how we can incorporate that into the program. Roland?
Okay, that's lovely. Roland.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, we could do a discussion on the buried children, those that were left behind. When the Windrush generation came here, those children, sometimes they had couple of children, sometimes more, and to facilitate them coming here, those children in many cases would have been left with family members back in the Caribbean or wherever they came from. And the Nadine White documentary actually covers that. Very good documentary. In fact, I'm working on an initiative to actually have that documentary shown in Canada sometime in the summer. But that's another story. But Liz, did you get to speak with Myers Davis, the lady that was over in Australia way?
No, is the answer to that question. What was the name? Miles Davis?
Myers, you know what I'm talking about. I said she was an associate of my former teacher in Jamaica.
No, I'm
Maya.
not.
Maya.
Maya. Maya.
No, her surname is Myers Davis.
What's her first name?
That would be M-Y-E, Liz, it would be M-Y-E-R-S
Davis. I'll come back to you on that one, Liz.
Come back to me on it. After the bump on the head, there are some things I've forgotten.
Yeah. Okay, as well as you mentioned SEN children earlier on from the Windrush generation, and
yes.
Gary Noy as well. Mace Barrett would be a good speaker for that. She has been doing a number of events, and in fact, she's got one coming up soon that I'll be attending. And she has also written a book on SEN children, and I think there's a short BBC documentary about her experience as well. So she'll definitely be a good one to speak on SEN children.
Could you send me her details then, Roland? I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll send you her details. In fact, it's okay. I'll drop her details in the chat as well. In the chat.
I think that that story cannot be told often enough about the fact that children arrived into our schooling system in the UK, and the challenges that they faced, because the teachers didn't understand the way that, this is my interpretation, but I've got good reason to back it. And last week we had Dr. Joseph Farquharson from the Jamaican Language Unit, and his predecessor, Professor Hubert Devonish, researched at length about the challenges that Jamaican children had when they were going into school in other countries. In fact, he also looked at the children going into schools in New York, and went to the Court of Regents in New York to explain that Jamaican children speak Jamaican, and that was why they seemed as if they had learning difficulties, because if you test a child who speaks Jamaican, if you test them on an English system criteria, or a New York system criteria, then these children were being put into special schools, as you mentioned with Professor Jeff Palmer. And it was a real, I remember back in the 70s, when I was in Wolverhampton, that we had special lectures about the discrimination that people had been faced. I can't remember the name of the academic who went around the country doing this, to try to, challenge teachers' perceptions that people who were coming from the Caribbean, in particular, people who came from different language-speaking countries, you could accept the fact that they needed to learn English, but people who came from Caribbean languages, Caribbean countries, spoke variations seemingly of English, which we now know through the work of the Caribbean Linguists Association are different languages. And so these children needed the opportunity to be able to gain confidence and manage with standard English as well as their Jamaican. Vivian?
Yeah, I was saying that the UNESCO has now declared that every child should be taught in their mother tongue, the first language, the first 6 years. And I do not know whether all educational institutions are aware of this. I say to my friends in Jamaica that by the time I was 6, 7 years, I was speaking 3 languages. I was speaking the Jamaican language, where you they go? The English language, where are you going? But the English language was reserved for only church and school. But the Jamaican language was at home in the village. And of course, my Maroon language, which was a kind of secret language among ourselves.
So, Vivian, was your Maroon language very different from Jamaican?
Oh, yes, we got that from Africa. The ancestors from Africa passed that down. But it was more used in expressions. They didn't use it as a continuing conversation. It was used in expressions to, as it were, hide, so that others didn't know what you were saying. For instance, Olive Lewin had, as the research fellow for UNESCO's first declaration of the music of the Moortown Maroons, that in 1769, some Maroons, you'll recall, were removed from Flagstaff in St. James, put on a ship to Nova Scotia in Canada, where the winter killed off, and the remainder sent to Sierra Leone. The Maroons in Moortown had heard about this, and they were very careful. So when they were invited to, on your visit to Jamaica, you'll remember a place in Jamaica on your way to the airport. It is on your way to the airport, and they do a stone quarry there, a cement. It is called Carib Cement Company. So when the Maroons came across the hills, because the harbor was nearby at the time, up to 1963. And when they came, they saw an enslaved making shackles. They didn't know that they were shackles. And they, however, they heard him singing, ugly dideo, ugly dideo, ugly dideo, ugly dideo. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes, no. So I break it down. Ugly, dide. Ugly, you understand that word, UGLY. Yeah. But dide mean is there. Is dide, is there. So they were singing ugly is there, which was a way to tell the Maroons, do not come. And they dashed back into the woods. You can read that UNESCO research by Olive Louis. They did not go. They ran back into the woods because the man spoke to them in the Maroon language, the workers, ugly dideo, ugly dideo. And the masters, the slave masters, thought that they were singing to make work lighter.
That's absolutely fantastic.
They were warning, do not come. Ugly dideo, ugly dideo.
It's coded language, isn't it? Coded language. Yeah, coded language.
It right there. That's it. Coded language. I love that. Yes.
Vivian, you just provide so much additional information in these sessions. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, we've kept going for an awful long time today with our session, first of all, with Simon. And I thank you for all the, oh gosh, all the ideas that you've given me. I think we need to have a special session, Vivian, with an opportunity for you to talk about Maroons. That and your Maroon heritage. That would be absolutely wonderful.
I look forward to that because you should know that I was invited in 2019 to Japan to open the Maroon Festival. And to my surprise, I thought I was in Jamaica because both sides of the street dressed up like Trenchtown with the zinc and the flag, and they dressed they dressed like Jamaicans and they spoke like Jamaicans. In Japan. In Japan.
Fantastic. I mean, the Japanese just love Jamaican culture. Yes. And Yasa Safara and I went through Japan one time when we were traveling. And I remember, it was at a festival, a Jamaican festival that he was performing. And yes, it was just amazing. People were so keen. And there was a lady there who'd produced a dictionary that took you straight from Japanese to Jamaican.
Jamaican, yes.
There wasn't any English in it at all.
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating.
But while you are on that, a Japanese ambassador told me that Jamaica's first inhabitants were originally Japanese thousands of years ago, when there was the land, Earth, didn't have global warming, the Ice Age, and they could walk over from Japan to South America and reach Jamaica, because you know that people are in search of food, fishing, just like the Jamaicans in Colombia at San Andres. They went in search of fishing and didn't return home. So there we go. People are
absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. That gives me a totally different thing to think about.
And the ambassador said that look at the height of the Japanese, a typical Japanese, and the Tainos. They shared something in common. I said, wow, it seems I'm a Japanese then.
Just amazing. Right, well, we can't wait for that session. Okay, then. Right, finally then, Roland, before I fall off my perch here and fall asleep.
Just a quick one. I've sent Erica Myers Davis is her name. I've sent you her details again in WhatsApp.
I've seen that. Thank you very much. It's in my book.
Okay.
So I've got Erica Miles is Erica Myers Davis, the author, her book, and I've also got a phone number
Yeah.
from Myers Davis. What I'd really, really appreciate would be an email for Myers Barrett.
Yeah.
If you could manage that at some stage.
He wrote a book on the West Indian Regiment and the Windrush generation. So she's got quite a bit of experience. So
absolutely fantastic.
I think you spoke with her some months ago, few months ago. Yeah.
Well, we're going to have a great few weeks looking at these different things, and I'm just realizing, of course, that the 17th of May is next week, so I better get organised. So I'll get on to Bill and see if he's around. If Bill isn't around, then we'll think of something else that we can do. So it was great that Simon joined us. I just hope that that it was possible for everybody to hear Simon's presentation, but he just certainly passed a whole lot of information through, and I'm going to watch the recording, and I'm going to do some screenshots and read all those things because they were just fascinating. Anyway, thanks ever so much, everybody, and as ever, we'll keep going best as we can, and Garrick, I'll see you at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. If
Yes,
you can
9 o'clock. Yeah, that'll be fine. Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thanks, everybody. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye
indeed.
now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Liz.
Thanks,
Hope you get some
Liz.
sleep soon. Yeah, cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.